Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, our whole mission here is to take these really complex sources and just boil them down so you walk away with the core ideas.
And today's source is definitely complex. It's an interview transcript that claims to lay out, and this is a quote, the entire scenario behind recent global events.
The source calls it the virus scam. And it's not just about health, is it? It connects these huge geopolitical shifts with, technology that affects you on a personal level.
Exactly. And just to be clear, our goal here isn't to say if these claims are true or false.
No, not at all. We're here to map out the specific worldview for you, to unpack the arguments about censorship, about manipulated statistics, and this alleged push for a technocratic state.
So to really get it, you have to start where the source starts, with the pyramid of power.
Yeah.
It argues that the people you see on the news, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, George Soros, they aren't the ones in charge.
Okay, so let's unpack that. That's a huge claim right out of the gate. If these global billionaires are just, what does the source call them? Gophers?
Gophers or frontmen, yeah.
Right. So if they're just frontmen, who is actually pulling the strings? I mean, according to this document.
The source alleges they're all taking orders from a much deeper entity, a global cult that operates completely in the shadows. And it's not new, apparently. It's ancient.
And this is where the claims get pretty esoteric. The very top of this pyramid, the ultimate power, it's described as not human.
That's right. They use these very old mythological terms for it. Demons, fallen angels, or specifically archons or jinn.
Archons or jinn. Now, for anyone listening, what is the source actually referencing with those terms? What do they mean in a historical context?
Well, if you look at Gnosticism or certain Middle Eastern mythologies, archons and jinn are basically non-physical entities. They're described as manipulators, often malicious ones, who control humanity through deception.
And they use human proxies to do it.
Exactly. In this narrative, that's the global cult network. It's a literal claim that a non-human consciousness is driving this whole agenda.
Okay, so if this network is secretly running the world, what happens when someone tries to expose it? The source says they had a very direct experience with censorship.
A very intense one. They said a second interview they did was gone, wiped from YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, almost instantly.
And what's interesting is why they claim it was taken down. They pinpoint two specific topics that were apparently forbidden.
The first was any mention of a possible link between the virus hysteria, as they call it, and the rollout of 5G.
And the second?
The second was the core claim that there is no COVID-19. Their reasoning was that the virus had, quote, never been isolated and shown to exist.
And this leads right into a claim about regulatory bodies getting involved. They specifically mention Ofcom.
Yes, Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator. The source alleges that Ofcom threatens serious sanctions against any broadcaster who even discussed a 5G connection.
So the source's argument is that Ofcom isn't a neutral party here.
It's not at all. They claim Ofcom is actively promoting 5G, so any threat from them would be, in their view, proof of a coordinated effort to protect the technology's rollout.
Right, protecting the infrastructure. Okay, so from censorship, the source moves on to try and dismantle the science or the statistics of the pandemic itself.
And it all rests on that one foundational claim we just mentioned, that the virus was never been isolated.
If you can't isolate it, you can't really diagnose it properly. You're left with just general symptoms.
Flu-like symptoms is the phrase they use. And this is why they go after the main diagnostic tool, the RT-PCR test.
Okay, so what's their issue with the PCR test? The whole world was using it.
Their argument is that the test doesn't look for an actual isolated virus. It only detects genetic material, basically just a code.
And why is that distinction so important for their argument?
Because, they claim, that genetic code could be from any number of coronaviruses. It's not specific proof of this one. They even cite the test's inventor, Carrie Mullis, saying it's a research tool, not a diagnostic one.
So you're getting a positive result for genetic material, not necessarily an active infectious disease.
That's the assertion. And this leads them to what they call the medical gold standard.
Robert Koch's postulates.
Exactly. Established way back in 1890, they're basically the scientific rules for proving a specific microbe causes a specific disease.
And one of those rules is that you have to isolate the microbe and grow it in a pure culture, right?
Crucially, yes. And the source claims this was never done for COVID-19. For them, this invalidates the entire premise of the pandemic.
So if the tests are flawed and the virus isn't proven to exist by their standards, then the next logical step in their argument is that the death numbers must be wrong.
Drastically wrong. They say the numbers were vastly, vastly, vastly inflating.
And they point to officials like Dr. Deborah Birx and the CDC, who basically admitted that the policy was to count any death as a COVID death if the person tested positive.
Right, even if they died with it from, say, a heart attack or cancer, not from it.
And they give that example from Italy.
They do. They claim Italian health authorities said 99% of their reported COVID deaths were people who already had 1, 2, or even 3 other serious pre-existing conditions.
So these were just re-diagnosed deaths, according to the source, to inflate the numbers and, well, create panic.
And the tool used to create that initial panic, they allege, was computer modeling.
The same kind of models used for things like climate change projections.
That's the peril they draw. They single out Professor Neil Ferguson's model, which predicted, between 250,000 and 500,000 deaths in the UK alone.
A catastrophic number. And that's what they say was used to justify the lockdowns globally.
Yes. And then once the lockdown was in place and the economic damage was done, they claim Ferguson just rolled back those predictions. But it was too late.
Which brings us to the alleged goal of all this. Why destroy the economy?
The source is very clear on this. The goal is dependency. If you crush small businesses, destroy independent livelihoods, people have no choice but to depend on the state.
And that's the path to what they call technocracy.
A system where these unelected technocrats, your Gates, your Musks, replace elected politicians. They just run society.
And to achieve that, you have to control the flow of money, which leads to the war on cash.
Exactly. They point out how the WHO warned people about catching the virus from physical money. They see that as a deliberate push to get rid of cash and move everyone to central bank digital currencies.
CBDCs, which the state can then monitor and control completely.
Total transactional oversight. And that surveillance theme continues with vaccines. They link Bill Gates, the WHO's second biggest funder, to this push for mass vaccination.
And this is where they bring up the quantum tattoo.
Yeah, sort of digital mark, readable by technology, to prove you've been vaccinated. They say it's part of these bigger programs like ID 2020 and the UN 2030 agenda.
Which they frame as blueprints for global centralized control.
It's all part of a larger technological prison as they see it. The quantum tattoo is the micro level, but the macro level is this electromagnetic bubble around the Earth.
It's the smart grid, or the technological sub-reality. How is that even possible?
According to the source, through 5G and the massive satellite constellations being put up, they specifically mention Elon Musk's plan for 42,000 Starlink satellites as a key part of this grid.
Okay, so what's the end game of a grid like that? What's the final piece of this puzzle?
It's called the Internet of Everything. The source claims the goal, by around 2030, is to connect the human brain directly to AI through this global cloud.
Brain to AI.
Yes. And they claim that once that happens, independent human thought will become, quote, virtually negligible. You're just a node in the system. And in a final detail, they allege this whole thing is intended to be headquartered in Israel.
So we've mapped it all out, from non-human entities down to brain to AI control. It's a pretty daunting picture. How does the source suggest anyone can possibly resist something so, well, total?
They use a Chinese concept, Ouija, the word that means both danger and opportunity. The danger is obvious.
And the opportunity.
The opportunity is in seeing the system's weakness. The source is adamant that this entire massive plan depends on one single thing.
Acquiescence to authority.
Exactly. They say it only worked because billions of people reacted in a predictable way.
And that predictable reaction comes from fear.
Overwhelmingly. It's described as a psychological manipulation that triggers the most basic human fear, the fear of death.
And when that fear kicks in, rational thought goes out the window. They say it triggers our survival mechanism, our reptilian brain.
Right. And you stop thinking straight. You'll do anything, give up any freedom. If you believe it will keep you safe, you hand over all your power.
So the solution then has to be psychological or maybe spiritual.
It has to be internal. The source says resistance begins when you stop identifying with labels, your job, your nationality, your body, and realize that I am awareness, infinite, eternal awareness.
Because if you see yourself as eternal awareness, the fear of death loses its power over you.
It loses its grip. And you no longer feel the need to surrender your power to an external authority to save you.
Wow, that is a huge amount of ground to cover. From archons to coast postulates to this final philosophical act of resistance.
It really is. I mean, we've seen the core claims laid out. that the pandemic was a tool to speed up dependency, to crush independent wealth, and to roll out this AI-driven control grid.
And that quote from the source is really chilling, that the cult walked into the room and the door clicked behind it. The idea that the plan is now out in the open and it won't stop unless someone intervenes.
Which leads to the final provocative thought this source leaves you with. If this entire global structure they describe depends on central coordination and, most critically, our compliance, what is the single most powerful action a person can take to ensure that, in their words, other futures start to play out? That's the question we're left with.